that collectivism, community building, and probably isolationism are what made our country and other Western countries formerly great. I wish I could keep entertaining this civic nationalist mentality. I still want to believe that people can coexist, that we can live in a multicultural society peacefully without undermining or endangering the white majority. But I'm about to start my family, and being told that I shouldn't have children, or I'm a bad person for doing so, or a racist person, I'm seeing this all in a new light. I'm realizing that there is going to be no coexistence while the majority is being actively attacked. And I'm realizing that at the end of this is complete cultural demolition. White people are acting like they're taking the moral high ground by engaging in their own extinction. Americans would never try to do this to another group, nor would any racial minority be treated this way in our country. And in every other country on earth, the majority people, the people who built the nation, are respected, as is their will and their vision in their own country, the country that they built. I will never again make a case for the continued existence of white people. I shouldn't have to, and no such expectation is ever laid at the feet of any other race. It's gotten to the point that I don't really care what the motivations of socialist leftists are, because the horrific result is always the same. Evil, naive. I don't really give a shit, because both communist leaders and college students are impervious to changing their minds through reasonable debate. Both are my enemy. I'm feeling more hopeful now than before because I'm seeing videos like this pop up with an increased frequency. I have actually had the script in the works for weeks, maybe months, but was worried about the reception and how controversial this topic is. I only decided that I was going to finish it when I saw an excellent video about civic nationalism by Lauren Rose. She's a new YouTuber whose channel is just going to explode. She has a real clarity about her. But seeing her video made me comfortable enough to talk about this. I feel like I'm in good company. That is how these things work. You see one person that's not afraid to discuss a certain topic, and it compels you, it emboldens you to take that topic on as well. I've linked her channel below, check it out. She seems to have gone through a similar journey where she got off on the civic nationalist stop and kind of took a look around and then got right back on the train. I think this is really common. Once you accept that multiculturalism always fails, it becomes increasingly difficult to maintain a civic nationalist position, which is predicated on the notion of seamless integration where immigrants choose to value their new nationality above their ethnicity, and they rarely do. I also wanted to jump up and down when I saw this Faith Goldie tweet the other day. My heart is with civic nationalists, I want to believe. However, a deliberate evisceration of national identities coupled with mass migration has made my head at odds with my heart. Right-wing civic nationalists are no better than leftist do-gooder multiculturalists. Result is ethnocide. She is exactly right, and it really lifts my spirits to hear people speaking so freely about this. So hats off to the two ladies that I've discussed, and of course to all the YouTubers that have been talking about this for years. I know I'm late to the game on this, but I just really did not want to lose faith in civic nationalism. But this is a quest for truth after all, and if we don't face the music, we really are staring into the face of our demise. That looks like a much bleaker future than people thinking that we're mean or that we're racist. Let me know what you think in the comments section if you've experienced a similar political evolution, if you still have faith that multiculturalism can work and that civic nationalism gives the West a brighter future. I'd love.
Man, the alt-right got salty while I was away. Okay, so where do we start? Two members of the skeptic community went full-blown Nazi while I was gone, which is to say that the Seattle YouTuber Rebecca Hargreaves, that's not me doxing her. She was already, her information was already put out there by a mainstream publication that was doing a profile on the rise of hate speech on YouTube. She goes by Blonde in the Belly of the Beast, and she, what's fascinating to me is I've called her out on this channel before. I've called her out to people like Bering who explicitly defended her by saying she's not a racist. After she had her big coming out party where she gave up on civic nationalism because the blacks are making her be an alt-righter by voting for Democrats. It's such a weird narrative. The alt-right is not responsible for themselves because the left wing... This is the talking point. And I've heard people that are not members of the alt-right make this point. And I just don't think that there's any evidence supporting this. There's just not, there's no substance here to back up the idea that somehow alt-righters are white people that have been radicalized by white guilt. Because, if you follow the arc of Nazism back to Germany, are you saying that then Hitler was, Hitler made the same point back in the day that, that the Nazis were created by Jewish abuse in society, that they were acting in self-defense. They made a lot of the same points about the Jews in coalition with non-Aryans were conspiring to erase the white race, and in order for the white race to defend themselves, they had to turn to full-blown fascism. This is an old, tired, and easily debunked argument. I think it's the kind of easily debunked argument that if you really want to believe that the left is a universal malefactor, that we are the ultimate villain, that not only are we responsible for when we do extreme things, but also that we provoke the other side to do extreme things. Fact number one, demonstrable fact. There is no attack on the white race in the West. There is no... The United States of America is 56% white. There are no protocols to and I'm not proposing any, but there are no protocols about stopping white people from reproducing as much as they want. There are no protocols in Western countries banning Christianity somehow, if it's a whole white Christian argument thing. And the imaginary attack on white people is about the calling out of white privilege, and the calling out of the idea that somehow white people like myself are entitled to the vanguard, that somehow the West dies if white people are not the majority of the population. The West dies if white Christians are not the most prolific most prolific religious group. The West dies if English, for in North America at least, if English is no longer the predominant language. Which is funny because Spanish is a language that is a white European language. Because people don't really think of the context that Latin American people speak Spanish because it's a colonial language. It was imposed upon them by Spanish conquistadors. So if, for example, in the United States of America, if we switched over into speaking predominantly Spanish, you would still be speaking a white, imperialist, colonial language that was imposed upon brown people. I digress. So Blonde came out as a white nationalist, and I, a fool, expected, okay, all of this time with the mouthy Buddha thing, the guy was existing on this razor thin premise of plausible deniability, that he did not explicitly say, I am a white nationalist, I support an ethno state. Now we have Blonde. Blonde said, I am an ethno-nationalist, I need to preserve a future for white children, blah, blah, blah. Bronx sits back and says, you know what? The skeptics are not completely over the edge. They'll acknowledge that this explicit white nationalism is a problem, and they'll condemn and excise this person from their community. Bronx, you dumb bastard. Because the opposite happened. Blonde does a relatively mainstream podcast called Beauty and the Beta, with a very, very bland mayonnaise and cucumber sandwich white liberal named Matt Christensen. Anyway, this dude is very, very white, very, very bland, very, very Matt Lowry. He's the kind of talking head that would have sort of been employed on interchangeably on MSNBC or CNN or Fox News, and he does have the liberal tolerance problem. You know, he talks about having originally been a Democrat and having been a supporter of Bernie Sanders, and then he was once the progressive movement no longer bowed to the privilege of white liberal men, meaning that feminism came to the forefront, women's rights issues came up to the forefront, and Black Lives Matter, ethnic minority issues with police brutality came to the forefront of the liberal movement. Matt Christensen took his toys and went home and voted for Trump and became a Trumper and became a liberal who cries about white victimization because clickbait articles say stuff like, do we need more white kids? Or, a lot of the reactionary clickbait, sort of HuffPosty stuff, BuzzFeedy stuff that triggers these really, really, provokes. I never use that fucking word trigger. I always try to carefully avoid it. So let me retract that. These BuzzFeedy clickbaity articles that provoke these liberal white bros into apoplectic rage about the fact that their balls might not be the movement leaders in the future. Anyway, she got this liberal white boy with her. And I tweeted him, and a couple of people tweeted him, your co-host is a Nazi. And, of course, he went to the liberal default of, we're on name-calling now? We're doing name-calling? I mean, it's pretty accurate. Anything that came out of her mouth in, like, that 12-minute video she did of, her big coming-out party for being a Nazi. Everything that came out of her mouth came out of Hitler's mouth. And Himmler's mouth and all those people. Let me tell you, if I started saying a bunch of Stalinist shit and someone called me a commie or a Stalinite or whatever, Stalinist, excuse me, I would own it like an adult because it's accurate. You know what I mean? If it's not accurate, then it's bullshit. But we have a bunch of skeptic, right-leaning, because I always make a distinction. There is a minor distinction in the skeptic community. There are some left-leaning skeptics, although they're few and they're like in a little pocket. The majority of skeptics in this time frame, in this space, are right-leaning. So Christensen goes, the name calling, and then he blocks me, right? Because he's, a wimp. And he starts antagonizing and humiliating my friend Danny Kors from behind a block, from having blocked Danny and then taking his tweets and making a show of his victimhood to his followers so that he can say that he's being attacked when no one was calling him a Nazi. I don't call him a Nazi now because I don't know what Christensen's position on ethno-nationalism is. But I know he's a fucking apologist. I know that he's a liberal apologist for Nazis. And I know that the biggest obstacle that I face on a daily basis in confronting the alt-right is a bunch of liberals who jump in and take the bullet. And it's such an act of stupidity Because, he wasn't the only one. Sugar Tits Bear, who was Bering's wife, who I never spoke to before on Twitter. I've never spoken to this person before. Even when me and Bering had a back and forth, I never spoke to this person because I didn't want to. There was a spat that I had with Jeff Holiday, and because his wife was a YouTuber, I bled our argument into her Twitter timeline, and I greatly regret that and felt very badly ashamed that I carried over the tone of my argument with Jeff Holiday into Memory Holiday's space because she didn't have anything to do with it, and it was just a complete dick move. And I didn't want to do that with Sugar Tits, as she's called. I don't know what else to call her. She doesn't have a name that I'm aware of that's publicly available. So Sugar Tits Bear rolls in and she defends Blonde with a very sort of a deeply incomprehensible defense, which is, have you asked her if she's a Nazi? Have you asked her if she's an ethno-nationalist, racist, etc.? And I said to her, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what she says to you in private. It doesn't matter if I ask Blonde, are you a racist, in DMs, and she goes, nope. What matters is she is a public political commentator, and publicly she has taken the position that she is no longer a civic nationalist, implying that she is a white nationalist, explicitly endorsing white nationalism, and she'll be held accountable for that in the public space, right? Meaning that she's going to get called out. She's going to get opposition from the left. And I'm not sure why this is so surprising. I don't understand why this is so catastrophic. But just to show you how much Nazis have liberals, and it seems like Bering and his wife are right-leaning liberals, right? They're center-right liberals. Sugar Tits Bear spends 12 hours on Twitter, on and off, 12 hours, defending Blonde. I think Blonde made 2 or 3 snarky tweets at me and then blocked me. And then Sugar Tits is sitting there, SJW, 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 for 12 hours. She's doing the Nazis' dirty work. Blonde never said she wasn't a racist. Blonde never said she wasn't an ethno-nationalist, not publicly. But she says it privately to Sugar Tits, and Sugar Tits, like a zombie, spends 12 hours screaming, you don't know her like I do, you don't know her in private, she's my friend! This is a political discourse. We're not playing my friends. This isn't high school. It doesn't matter what little note Blonde sent you at lunchtime. It doesn't matter what secrets you know. If you support someone who comes out as an ethno-nationalist, and the Southern Poverty Law Center then calls you out for supporting someone who is an ethno-nationalist, if you support somebody who's an ethno-nationalist and you don't condemn them, then you are supporting white nationalism itself, even though you don't directly endorse it. You are empowering and mainstreaming someone who does. That's a hair that I don't want to split, that I refuse to split. And I'll come back to what I've come back to so many times on this channel. It is the people carrying water for white nationalists making these, it's the people defending okay to be white as harmless. It's the people defending the idea of a white nation or white pride itself as harmless, as though history didn't exist, as if we didn't see the last time what happened when white people became obsessed with ethnic pride and purity.